So, I'm going to give a brief little kind of demo of how you actually play Time Flux. So basically, you and your opponent choose a deck of cards, and what happens is there is a future to the game. And then there's a time traveler and an era attached to that time traveler. And you're going to pick a time traveler and the era that they're from. So I'll just give you a quick example. So you have a future and a past to every game. Then there's 5 different time travelers that you have to pick from. Okay? And out of these 5 different time travelers, you and your opponent or opponents pick one. So let's say, for example, you're going to be a cyborg and I am going to, oh, I got these mixed around. You're going to be a cyborg and I'm going to be a politician. Okay, so we choose our time travelers and then we grab their respective decks. And for this example, I'm just going to take a stack of cards. And this is you, this is your era, this is me, this is my era. And so they go like this, and they become part of the board for the game. And there's a future and a past to every single game. So that's how you set up the board. Now you start in the era that you're from, and I start in the era that I'm from. And then we play. And so you would roll a die to see who goes first. Okay, so you roll a die to see who goes first, and then you draw 4 cards. And your opponent would draw 4 cards. Now, there's a few things we want to go over. The first thing is the way that your, excuse me. There's a few things we want to go over. The first thing is the way the eras work and the time travelers work, and then we'll go over card types and the way that they work. So the eras they represent time, and you can travel from era to era, and it's not linear. It's spatial, so you can go anywhere you want. It doesn't matter. You don't have to go from here to here, and then you can make it here. And your opponent can do the same. Now, every time traveler, can I zoom in on this? Every time traveler has several. Actually, I have copies of these guys right here. Yeah. Okay. So there's a few things that I want to explain to you about the different eras and the time travelers, and then we'll go over what the actual cards do and how all that stuff works. So the first thing is the time travelers. Your time traveler has 4 abilities on them. All time travelers have 4 abilities, and they share 3 of the same abilities, and they have 1 unique ability. So they all have travel to any era, attack, draw a card, and then they have a unique 4th ability. Now, basically the way they work is every turn you can use up to 2 of the abilities on your time traveler, but you can't use the same ability twice. So for example, I can move and then attack, or I can attack and then I can move, but I cannot attack twice. I cannot move twice in the same turn. Okay, and that's the way that your time travelers work. The eras also have special abilities, and different things happen when you're there. And it depends on what part of the turn it is. So for example, this one lets you draw a card at the beginning of your main phase. This one lets you gain life at the end of your turn, and also gains life for you when you enter. This one makes people discard cards when you enter, but you can get cards back from your void, so there's a give and a take. And this one has 2 special abilities as well. So that's the way the eras work, and you can use those to your advantage. All eras are usable by all time travelers, even if they're specifically assigned to a certain time traveler. Now, the other thing on the time travelers that's really important to note, and this is it has to do with our resource management and the way that you kill somebody and win the game. So, on every time traveler, there is a power level for their attack, and then there is a life total for how much life you start the game with. Now, the power level is for whenever you attack somebody, this is how much damage you're going to do to them. Everybody, for the most part, has different numbers. Their life total is actually the amount of life you start the game with. If it goes to 0, you die. So you want to make sure that it doesn't go to 0. And then you also have your intelligence amount. Excuse me. Now your intelligence amount is the way that that you play cards from your hand, and that's a resource in the game. Every time traveler, for the most part, has a different intelligence amount at the top, and the way it works is it's a base intelligence, and so the way you determine your total intelligence is by adding the number of cards in your hand to the number on the card. So for example, in the beginning of the game, my time traveler would start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 intelligence, whereas your time traveler would start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 intelligence. And you can play cards from your hand as long as they meet the intelligence requirement. So it's not a cost. You don't spend intelligence like you would like other resources in some of the other card games, like money. It's not an allowance that you get every turn. It's a constant. So as long as you have that much intelligence, you can play the card. And I'll give you an example. For example, so here's an example of how intelligence works. So let's say I start the game with my 4 cards, because that's what you actually start the game with, and then my time traveler has an intelligence level of 3. So his base intelligence is 3, his total intelligence is equal to the number on the card plus the number of cards in my hand at all times. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can play anything in my hand that's 7 or less. So let's say, for example, I play this card. It's called Blessed Armor. And as you can see, Blessed Armor has a 6 at the top. That's the requirement for the intelligence amount. So as long as I have 6 intelligence or more, I can play this card. So I put it into play, and now my intelligence is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I can continue to play cards from my hand because I have 6 intelligence. And like I said, it's a constant. It's not an allowance. As long as I have intelligence, I can play cards. So for example, let's say I had no cards in my hand, he still would have 3 intelligence. If I had things in play that required a certain amount of intelligence to do, say for example, his abilities, I could still use them. And that's the way intelligence works. Outside of the time travelers and the eras, there's 5 other card types. So the first one I'm going to go over is an event. Now an event can be played from your hand, and when it happens, once you play it, the first thing that's going to happen is the effects of the card happen, and then it goes to the void, and it stays there. And this is your used card pile basically, or anything that has been destroyed from play, that's been played and used, and it's a one-time use, or it's been discarded from your hand, it goes to your void. The other thing is there's armaments, and there are also trinkets. And so the way armaments and trinkets work is when you play an armament or trinket, it goes back here to what we call the 3rd row, and it stays there. You don't move them, and they are always attached to your guy. So for example, an armament comes into play, a trinket comes into play, and you move from here to here. It's literally it's like equipment for your time traveler, and it goes and it travels with your time traveler through time. So as you move through time, you still have access to these cards. Now there's also trinkets and, or I'm sorry, there are also traps and relics. And so the way the traps and relics work are pretty similar, but they're also very different. And so a relic comes into play, and it comes into play in the era that you're in, and it basically attaches to that era, so you can't take it with you when you leave. So let's say I'm in the past, I play my Book of Secrets here, which is a relic, and then I leave because I want to come and attack you. I want to hurt you. So when I come over here, I no longer have access to this relic. It's not usable because I'm not in the past. I'm in the apocalyptic era. And so in order for me to use this relic, I would need to simply just come back to the past, and I can use it again. Now, there's also traps. And the way the traps work is they come into play face down and deactivated. So they can't be used the first turn they come into play. And at the very beginning of every turn, you have a refresh period where you refresh all of your cards. And what refreshing is, it just means simply you straighten out the card to signify that the card can be used and it's ready to be activated. Now, a trap is different from a relic because you can move and you can still activate the trap no matter where you're at. And so what happens is, let's say I move away and I set this trap, and you're hurt real bad, you're real close to dying, and you need some life, so you come over here. Well, I have a trap laid out, and I can activate this trap regardless of where I'm at, and the effects of this trap will happen. And so the way you activate a trap is you have to meet the intelligence requirement on the top of the card. So a trap is free to play, but in order to activate it, you must have the appropriate intelligence in order to do so. So the appropriate intelligence would of course be equal to or less than, or I'm sorry, equal to or greater than the number on the top of the card. And that's pretty much all of the cards. The only other thing is at the top of every card, there's also, can you zoom in to get this? This is an important one. Can you see these? So
I'm zoomed in though.
All right, so on the top of all the cards, there is a, it says present or timeless. Now, wherever your time traveler is at is